Hey guys, it's your boy Java Monkey J. Today my friend and I are talking World of Warcraft Cataclysm. This section was taken from our World of Warcraft tier discussion where we ranked each expansion in a tier list format and discussed our thoughts and opinions on the game. If you'd like to see that full video, it is linked below. However, I will be posting shortened videos, one for each expansion in the coming days. So subscribe so you don't miss it. I've been Java Monkey J. Peace.
So what about Cata then? Let's move on to Cata.
Are we talking about Cata as it was, or are we talking about Cata as it will be in Classic?
Probably a mixture of both.
Because Cata as it was has a lot more problems than I think it will have as Cata Classic, right? So Cata as it was, you had some balance issues, first of all. The first raid is not very balanced at all. I don't think Warrior is viable in the first patch of Cata. I don't remember how it turned out at the end, but I don't think Warrior was viable at all. Because that was when they got Single-Minded Fury, and it turned out that was bad, but Titan's Grip was also bad because they lost all their hit rating. Like, I don't think that balance was all that great from my memory in the first patch. The heroics brutally overtuned, or at least brutally tuned to the point that, like, the majority of players don't find them fun. Let's say that. I don't think that the heroics are hard, like, people won't be able to clear them, but I think they're hard enough that, like, random heroics aren't a thing in Cata because they're super comp dependent. You need CC. You can't just, like, zug through them. And so, like, if they give us unnerfed Cataclysm heroics and they give us heroic double plus nonsense, which they've already said they're going to do, no one's going to have fun in that. Right? It's tedious. They take way too long because you have to CC every pack 3 times. Like that, yeah, no, it's challenging, but it's not really. You have the mage click polymorph. Like, that's not hard. It's just tedious. And to me, I think that that's going to be a really overrated part of the game that I think a lot of people are going to be like, wow, I'm super excited for hard heroics. No, you're not. No, those are not hard heroics. They're just tedious. What I would like is the speedrun, right? Like the whole idea of Mythic Plus, where, like, yeah, no, your Mythic Plus 2s and Plus 5s are not hard.
No, they're a joke.
They're a joke, but, like, the speed of doing them and executing them well, right? You can't just, like, polymorph one thing at a time.
Yeah, and getting rewarded based off of that speed, even at lower tiers. It feels good.
It feels like that. To me, is what you ask for when you ask for hard 5-man content. You're asking for Mythic Plus. Where you can challenge yourself as much as you want, and you're rewarded for how hard you challenge yourself. But if you want easier content, you can tone it back. And I think that scaling is really nice. Yeah, no, that's not what we get in Cata. What we get in Cata is tedious. And so I'm hoping that they actually give us unnerfed ones for the first, like, week. And basically, as soon as they drop the raid, I want there to be nerfs on the heroics to the point that they're, like, just doable.
Yeah.
And you don't have to CC things constantly, and I don't like that. Does not sound fun to me.
Yeah, and outside of like systems and stuff, Cata for me, and I think for a lot of people, is really the point of, like, where WoW begins to shift into like a more retail version of the game. But not only that, they take away they innovate quests in a really good way. Because, like, let's be honest, like, up to that point, questing sucked. It wasn't fun, and Cata really came along and changed the world. I think in, like, a way that was, like, needed, but wasn't exactly great for a lot. Like, a lot of people didn't like that, and I can understand why you wouldn't. But the questing was awesome. It was fantastic.
So yeah, so the questing I think gets vastly improved, and I think that a lot of people don't really like the homogeneity of it. I do think that the classic world and the quests in it, where everyone is clearly unique, it's handcrafted, like, they're all different. I think that has a place, and I think that classic era servers are really cool for that preservation, right? That 1 to 59 journey is hard.
Yeah,
it's challenging. There's dangerous parts of the world. Those quests are interesting, and if you care about lore, they're fantastic.
There's all
kinds of Easter eggs. But if you're a new player coming into the game and that's your introduction, and it's that brutal, and everybody else is talking about how fun Endgame is, and how fun the Bastion of Twilight Raid is, and how fun Firelands is, and getting their legendary staff, Terragosa, Dragonwrath's Rest, or whatever nonsense, there's this huge disconnect in terms of the quality of life for a leveling player questing their way through versus somebody who's already at max level.
For sure.
And I think that equalizing that and updating the old world was necessary
Absolutely.
to move the game forward, but I do like there should still be a preservation of what there was before.
And clearly that's true. I mean, because look at hardcore. Yeah, look at hardcore.
Yeah. Look at hardcore. Look at the vanilla classic back in 2019 or whenever it launched, and it was huge. Yeah. Like it's obvious that there is a draw there. It's not something that I want to go play every day, but it is something that I think should be available for people to experience because it was incredible for the time.
Exactly, and so in this conversation, both can be good. Both are good, and we're okay with separating that.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So Cataclysm's other issues come from the severe lack of content at the tail end. So this was related to back in the day, not Cataclysm Classic. Back in the day, Dragon Soul lasted for what, like 10 months? 11? Something ridiculous, like just an inordinate amount of time to spend in one single raid tier that wasn't even a particularly good raid tier. It's not that it's terrible, right? I think it's better than a few of the raid tiers that we've done in Classic, namely SSC and TK, which were probably the worst experience that I've ever had. Man, that was awful. But like, you have a good raid tier in Bastion of Twilight. It's not as good as ICC. You have a good raid tier in Firelands. It's not as good as ICC. And then you have a mediocre raid tier that isn't as good as either of the two that came before it. It's not as good as ICC. It's not as good as Ulduar. It's not as good as Sunwell. Right? And it just falls flat in terms of this is the end. This is the end of the expansion. And then it lasts for too long. Right? That's the history of Cataclysm.
Don't you think, though, from like a difficulty perspective, it was a good change?
I mean, in terms of like rating difficulty as a whole, I think Cataclysm is much more on par with everything is difficult as Ulduar and ICC, as they're like pinnacle bosses. Every fight has some prog on it, and I think that's good.
You think that's good at the time? Because I don't think it's good now. I think it used to be good, but now it's not.
So I think that's good because I don't think that there will be nearly as much frustration associated with wiping on heroic Ragnaros as there is associated with wiping on Putricide, for example.
Why is that?
Because I think that heroic Ragnaros is clearly a more involved fight than most of the other classic fights. I think that heroic Firelands in general is the beginning of more retail-esque fight design. And I think that is ultimately a step in the direction that I would like to go with rating. Like, that's more interesting to me. I enjoy retail rating a lot more than I enjoy classic rating because I like complicated fights. I like where there's, tons and tons of call-outs that have to go out. I think Lich King is the most interesting fight in classic because it's a retail fight. There's so much cool stuff going on. That's fantastic. Yogg No Lights was another example where like there's cool stuff going on everywhere. Right? Like those are the fights that I think of as like the peak of content, as opposed to something like Brutalis or original Rag in Molten Core. I don't think of as a very interesting fight. Now that's probably Molten Core rating and classic rating in general is probably a little twisted because of how fast those fights are, because of how strong warriors are with world buffs. But in general, I think that the more difficult fights in Cataclysm are going to be much more interesting to engage with than the fights that we've been doing so far.
Absolutely. But I also think that the ending raid tier and Wrath ICC is sort of like seemingly the max for what the WoW community can do. Yeah.
So yeah, and I don't think you're necessarily wrong. I'm not expecting, the player base to be as large for Cata.
Yeah. But the thing is, too, is like,
I don't. There's a couple of reasons for that, but
I don't know how they fix it either, though. That's the thing. Like, I don't like. Do they straight up shift to more retail style raids where it's like LFR, Mythic, normal, heroic, and like that's what we do? Or like, I don't see the solution moving forward either. I don't like where Cataclysm went, but I don't know how you fix it, because I don't necessarily think that Dragonflight is the answer either to the raid scaling, the raid difficulty, because I mean clearly Mythic isn't doable by a casual audience either. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So in my mind, the answer was not doing Classic Cataclysm at all. I don't think that there's enough draw for it. Blizzard says there is, and we'll see. The player base is better than they were, but the player base is clearly struggling with ICC.
Do you think
and
the first
ICC, I think
tier of Cata's harder than ICC?
I think that there are fights in the first raid tier that are much harder than non-Lich King fights in ICC. I think they're harder than Putricide. I think they're harder than Cindy. Like these wall bosses that a lot of raids struggled with. I think that there are not final bosses in Bastion of Twilight that are harder than those. And I certainly think that Heroic Firelands is harder than those.
I didn't think any of those were harder than Arthas.
I don't think any of them are harder than Arthas, with the possible exception of Heroic Rag. I think Heroic Rag is about that difficulty. But I don't know. I think that the player base will struggle because there aren't going to be any more like easy tank and spank fights in general.
Yeah.
This is kind of the end of that era. You don't have there's never going to be another patchwork fight.
Yeah. I think overall, Cataclysm for me lands probably B. I don't think it's better than Wrath. I don't think it's better than Classic. I don't like a lot of the changes. I don't think it's going to be popular or game changing on its second pass.
I think I agree with you. I am looking forward to a lot of the changes because I like the rework of the old world. I like flying in the old world. I like the better leveling experience. What I particularly like is the class design and the spec design in Cataclysm.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of classes get a massive improvement. Hunter going to focus feels like it should have been the answer from the beginning, for a number of reasons. Balance Druid gets its coolest rotation almost ever. They're so fun. The fine control over your burst windows is phenomenal, and super like you have so much cool stuff you can do with balance in Kata. And then you have, I don't know, you've got, Frost Mage is a viable DPS. You have Subtlety Rogue is a viable DPS in Raid. You bring in and fix a lot of these like kind of meme specs like Beast Mastery and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know that the balance is all there, but I do think that the from a design perspective, every class starts to feel more like it like each spec feels like it's that spec. It's that identity is starting to be discovered, right? And and I say that in terms of like when Kata originally came out, I think that spec identity was one of the core like mottos that they followed when they were trying to design the new talents and the new way that things played. This is the first time that you have to actually lock a spec when you choose to make your character and you choose your first talent point. You have to choose, do you want to be a fire mage or an arcane mage or a frost mage? And you don't get to just like put 5 points in frost and then 5 points in fire and then 5 points in arcane and then back to fire for a little bit. You can't do that anymore. You have to put 35 points into your chosen spec before you can put points anywhere else. And one of the reasons that they did this is because if you think about your like 31 point talents right now, that are like your like key abilities that are like fundamentally important to the way that spec works, if you could just get like 3 of those, you could make some weird hybrid spec. And Blizzard had 2 choices. They either needed to make sure that none of the hybrid specs broke the game, or make sure that you couldn't spec them so that they could spend their development time, instead of fixing broken hybrid specs, on better game design.
Yep.
Right? And it's definitely a choice, right? I see why a lot of people don't like that they can't like spend their points as they want, and they can't do those really cool hybrid specs that they think would be like really fun. But at the same time, it's Blizzard budgeting their time. Yeah. It's Blizzard saying, okay, we appreciate that you want to do these weird janky stuff, but like we're not going to support it. If it was going to break the game, we're not going to let it. If it was just going to be viable, it's not a playstyle that we think is super unique or interesting or whatever. So we don't want to just like break the game to make sure that that's balanced. So instead, we're just going to break the game so that you can't play that. And you have to choose one of the supported playstyles that we think provided a strong enough variety, right? And it's a super controversial decision. This is kind of the de facto end of the hybrid specs, right? But like hybrid specs had already been dead, right? When was the last time we had a hybrid spec? I guess Blood Frost with the bringing the Frost raid buff as a Blood DK tank through Wrath was a thing. But like
who's running that kind of stuff now in Classic? Like,
so you had oh my god, what's the balanced druid that's a healer? Dream State Druid. I played that through a lot of TBC. Right? You Dream State Druid before that. I don't think there was any other class that did that kind of stuff. Outside of some like really weird like jank stuff.
Well,
but like I don't think there was anything else that was meta.
There is world. I mean, it's mostly for PvP. They have the
SLSL.
Yeah, SLSL.
Yeah. So like, there's definitely some costs.
Yeah.
But like those things haven't really been meta at any point except for the Blood DK. Yeah. And that Blood DK is eliminating the point of Frost DK existing, right? Like it's starving out Frost DK for the entirety up until ICC because Frost was lower damage than Unholy. You getting a tank that could bring that buff meant that you didn't bring a Frost DK at all, and so it costs Frost DK their raid spot.
Yeah.
Right? So like that it's the kind of thing that causes a little bit of problems in terms of how you're forced into playing not Frost.
Yeah, I think it's again one of those situations where it's a breakaway from now what makes classic and what makes this sort of more retail. It's a more retail focused decision. Right. And, a lot of the classic aspects of class design got left behind, even though they weren't even really that prominent anyway. You know, people just are losing that choice.
You would never spec some dumb hybrid spec, but you really appreciate that you have the option to.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? It's the same kind of nonsense that gets talked about when Mists of Pandaria's talent rework comes in and you lose all of those, 0 of 5 nonsense talents that are just like, give me 1% hit, please, for this talent point. Yeah. No, nobody actually is doing anything but the cookie cutter build.
Yeah, like, exactly.
Everybody's going to Wowhead or Icy Veins or whatever your favorite site is, or Warcraft logs, and stealing somebody's talent build. There isn't this like massive amount of choices that you have. You don't have 71 choices to spend your 71 talent points. Don't lie to me.
Yeah, in fact, and if you're talking about talent choice, really, I think that what does it best is clearly Dragonflight. There's a lot of variability that you can get a hold of.
I mean, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but I think the Dragonflight has the best character progression in terms of how you choose to specialize your character of any MMO of all time. I don't even think it's close. I think that the way that they have done the talent trees and the way that current itemization supports different choices is super, super interesting. And I know that the itemization point is going to be a really hot topic, but I do believe that.
One thing we didn't mention with Kata is the PvP. PvP comes into itself full swing, and I think Kata is probably the first time PvP's really awesome. really fun, and highly competitive in a really meaningful way, where one class isn't really just completely pub stopping everyone else. Everyone really gets abilities to deal with a lot of different situations in PvP, and PvP really comes online in Cata. It's one of the draws to Cata. The PvP scene is, back in the day, it was huge.
The spiciest takes. I thought I was going to be the one saying shit that was going to get me in trouble. That was a wild take. PvC Arena was super, super competitive, and it was super, super popular. While it wasn't necessarily as popular the second time around, because we've seen things that are better now. When that came out, that was wild. Arena was fantastic as an addition to this game.
Absolutely.
The balance was not anywhere near as brutal in original TBC as it was today. Granted, I will give you that Rogue Mage Druid. Gosh, who else? Rogue Mage Druid.
Hey, some things never
really
change.
Kind of who has run the I guess Priest, Rogue Mage Druid Priest, kind of ran the arena for all of TBC, but like, I don't think Cata is going to fix that. What Cata did is bring in RBGs, right? RBGs are much more casual as a form of ranked PvP.
Oh, RBGs are fantastic. They're super cool.
RBGs are great, but Wrath Arena and TBC Arena are also very big deals. And
they're
big.
big.
That Cata is the PvP expansion, where we got a whole bunch more popular PvP. That's not entirely true. That's not a fair statement.
I don't know. I think it is
a lot more casual friendly. I think it's a lot more casual friendly. So PvC had the problem of RNG hit stuns and stun resists and nonsense. Wrath has gotten rid of that. In Wrath, I think almost every class has a viable spec at the highest level of Arena. So it's not really a class diversity issue. There is a lot of spec diversity issues, but I don't think it's much class diversity, right? But what Cata does is opens up a lot more of that, because Battlegrounds and like casual PvP is bigger, right? So
What's
like
up, bro?
playing the exact meta spec isn't as big a deal.
Ooh, we got a list going.
We got a list going.
Hold on. Don't take this the wrong way. Can we move a different Discord? I'm sorry, Needle. It's nothing against
We're
you.
trying to record.
We're trying to record.
Oh, okay. I can be quiet.
I'll move you up. How about that? We'll go to officer or something.
I live here.
Is this where we're at? Yep, that's where we're at. Beautiful. All right. PvP Cataclysm Bis hot take.
That's a wild take.
I stand by it. I think PvP in Cata was fucking awesome. I think it's probably one of the best.
I think it's fucking awesome,
parts.
but I think it's already fairly awesome.
Oh yeah, no, it's still awesome.
In Wrath, and it was already awesome in vanilla, even at least in terms of Battlegrounds. I don't think duels in vanilla were very interesting, as we just saw in the Makarot tournament. I think that was pretty classic example of how bad can PvP be in a 1v1 scenario.
It's pretty rough.
And like obviously the Makarot tournament was really exciting. Because it's hardcore and they're dying for real. They're wasting level 60s, but like also it was clearly just like who can buy the most gold.
Yeah.
Like Jesus Christ, who can get handed the most consumables? Some really bad design there. But like, man, Cata Biz PvP. I don't think so. I think it's good. I think it's very good. It might even be an improvement. I don't remember it that well over Wrath, but
okay. So Cataclysm, are we cool with B tier?
I think we're cool with B tier.